Now, we're going to be talking about Brexit. Remember that Eurosceptic Tory MPs have reacted just a little bit angrily to claims the government could pursue a Swiss-style deal with the European Union.
Well, Number 10 has categorically denied that the idea is on the table, but last night Nadine Dorries warned Rishi Sunak not to pursue anything that could jeopardise the UK's sovereignty.
Well, earlier on this morning, we spoke to Immigration Minister Robert Jenrick, who said there was no truth to the story. Here's a reminder of what he told us.
I don't know where that story came from, but it's completely untrue. We have no intention of pursuing that kind of arrangement. There are respectable arguments either way, but we have a settled position now as a country, and we reached an agreement with the European Union in 2019 and 2020, and we're moving forward on that basis. Of course, there are opportunities now to improve our trading relationship, as there are to improve our security and our immigration relationship with the European Union, but we're not interested in reopening the fundamental position that we reached with the EU a few years ago.
OK, well, let's get the thoughts from the opposition with the Shadow Economic Secretary to the Treasury, Tulip Siddiq, who joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
OK, so first let's start off. There's the Tory party at civil war, the press are telling us, over their position on a Swiss-style arrangement with the European Union. Is that the kind of thing the Labour Party would like?
Well, the Conservatives have made a complete hash of this Brexit deal after telling the country that they were going to get Brexit done. It doesn't really feel like they have got the deal done. For a start, they made a huge mess over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Then they decided to ramp up the divisive rhetoric with our EU partners. And then they signed a deal with Australia that their own ministers seem to be running away from. And then on top of all of that, they don't seem to be exploring any trading opportunities with partners outside the EU. So after the G20, the Prime Minister in his statement talked about how there was no actual trade deal forthcoming with the USA and couldn't give us a time on the trade deal with India. So we're very worried about what they're actually doing with this Brexit deal. And we're not sure where these rumours are coming from in terms of a Swiss-style deal.
Running us through the history of the Conservative Party in the last little while. But what's Labour's position? Would you categorically not be in favour of a Swiss-style relationship with the European Union?
We in July, Keir Starmer set out very clearly what we would want as terms of a Brexit deal. He set out 5 points that he talked about. The first one was mutual recognition of qualifications of services, so whether it's our scientists or services. Another one was about our security pact with the EU, about data sharing and making sure that we could keep our borders safe. We talked about trading opportunities. We talked about investment in Britain. But what we really want to do is sort out the Northern Ireland Protocol and get a Brexit that really works for our country. Of course, we need some flexibility from the EU as well. Those were the 5 points that Keir Starmer set out for our Brexit deal, and it is not in accordance with what the Tories are doing.
OK, so today you're criticising the Tories on their fiscal responsibility, but let's not forget the Labour Party wanted sooner, longer and harder lockdowns that have put us $500 billion in debt. Surely things would be just as bad, if not worse, under a Labour government.
That's absolutely not true. I think what I should say to you clearly is that if you look at the economic record of the Conservative Party at a situation where household disposable income is falling by 7% in the next 2 years, the worst record ever, that's not just a figure. 7% is people's lives, their ability to buy food, their ability to pay their energy bills, their ability to feed their children. These are really bad economic times. It's the highest tax burden ever on record. We're in a situation where we're meant to be the lowest growth country in the OECD in the next 2 years as well. We're the only country in the G7 that hasn't gone back to its pre-COVID levels of growth. So I won't be taking any lessons from the Conservative government about economic responsibility. What I want to see is a proper plan for growth, which I still haven't seen.
With respect, I don't think the Conservative Party would necessarily disagree with the OBR with their assessment of how the cost of living is being impacted, but they would say this is attributable directly to the fact that we have just been through a pandemic. We're also facing a war in Ukraine. But the question remains, would it not be worse if Labour had been in government throughout all of this?
No, absolutely not. When we were in government, the economy grew, so that's absolutely not true. The other thing I would say is that, yes, of course, there are global factors. So global factors in terms of Ukraine, as you talk about, there are global factors in terms of the pandemic. Why is it that all the other countries in the OECD have a higher rate of growth than us? Why is it that our growth is 1.4% and the OECD average is 2.1%? What's the reason for that? Why is it the reason that no other country that we can be compared to is having an emergency budget, but we are? So it's absolutely not right to say that it's only because of global factors. Whereas the global factors may have played a role, we were exposed because we didn't have a plan for growth and we hadn't insulated our constituents from the shock of global factors. And that's what government should be doing. They should have a long-term growth plan. I don't know if you saw over the weekends, the head of the CBI, the Confederation of British Industry, said Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement had no plan for growth at all.
Well, yes, but they also pointed out...
The chairman of Tesco's...
Go on, I was just going to say, the OBR, since you mentioned them, they also talked about the cost of Brexit. Now, that's not to say you should be in favour of it or against it. There is a cost to leaving the European Union. That was a democratic decision. The British government had a mandate to do that. And presumably, Labour would have had to have carried out Brexit as well had they been in power at the time of the referendum. So you talk about this being a uniquely British problem. Well, it is, frankly, isn't it?
I mean, of course, there was a decision made, as we know, in the country to leave Brexit. But what happens afterwards is what we should be looking at. And the Brexit deal that they've secured is completely wrong for our country. So, of course, any government would have had to leave the European Union. But how you negotiated that without ramping up divisive rhetoric with your trading partners and making a hash of the Northern Ireland Protocol is what we would have looked at. The chairman of Tesco's has said the Labour Party is the only party that has a credible plan for growth. So, you know, when the chairman of Tesco's comes out for us, I think you probably know which way the country is heading. But you can't ignore the facts in terms of the drop in the standard of living for people and the fact that the government still won't follow some of the policies that we're talking about in order to generate more revenue for people in the country.
I just want to finish with a question about the World Cup, Tulip Siddiq, because, of course, lots of people will know you having represented and looked out for Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe for many years, who was in your, or is indeed in your constituency. Being Iranian, how important and symbolic will this match be tonight in an already controversial World Cup, to be playing a country with such a controversial reputation itself?
And I think with Nazanin, she's always made it clear that it wasn't the people of Iran who imprisoned her, it was the authorities. So I think that's one thing to say. She is very proud of being Iranian and talks about how she wants her daughter to know about her Iranian heritage. But you are right in that in terms of the country and the government, not so much the people, there's a lot of controversy about what's going on right now, especially with the rights of women, and Nazanin has spoken out about it. I think I can't speak for Nazanin, but what I would like is that if we're going to play a country like Iran, we probably should use the opportunity to highlight what's happening in the country in terms of the brave women who are going out onto the streets, ripping off their hijabs and saying, we want to reclaim the right to do what we want over our own bodies. So if we can use that platform to highlight some of what's going on, for me, that's what I would be doing.
OK, Tulip Siddiq, really good to talk to you this morning. Thanks very much indeed for your time.